Alright, I've never really told anyone this story before. I don't know. Maybe it's because I didn't want to believe it myself, or maybe because it just sounds too weird, but I can't shake it. And the more I think about it, the more it feels like I need to get it off my chest, even though I'm still not sure what to make of it. So a few years ago, I was driving through Pennsylvania. I'd just quit my job. A job I hated, by the way. Corporate 9-to-5 grind, you know the deal. I decided I needed a break, some time to myself. So I figured, why not hit the road? Just me, my car, and a couple of weeks to clear my head. I didn't have a plan or a destination, really. I just wanted to explore. See parts of the country I'd never been to. By the third day, I'd driven farther than I expected. The thing is, when you're driving through some of these rural parts of Pennsylvania, you realize how isolated you can get without even noticing it. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong. Rolling hills, forests, those endless winding roads. But after a while, you stop seeing towns, and gas stations get more and more spread out. I remember checking my phone to pull up a map and realizing I had no service. Typical, right? It was getting late, probably around 8:30 or 9 at night. The sun had already gone down and I was running low on gas. I started to worry because I hadn't passed a gas station in hours. So I was driving slower, trying to conserve fuel, and that's when I saw the sign. It wasn't much, just an old faded wooden board by the side of the road, half covered by overgrown weeds. It read, Carter's Roadside Inn, vacancy. Now, I've stayed in some shady motels before, but this place looked rough. The paint was peeling off the sides of the building, and the neon vacancy sign outside was flickering, like something out of a bad horror movie. But I didn't have much choice. I was tired, I had no signal, and I wasn't about to sleep in my car in the middle of nowhere. So I pulled in. The parking lot was empty, except for one old pickup truck parked near the office. The truck looked like it hadn't moved in years, like it was just a permanent fixture of the lot. I grabbed my bag, locked the car, and walked up to the office. I could hear the hum of fluorescent lights inside, but the place looked dead. The door creaked when I opened it, and the smell hit me right away. A mix of musty air, stale cigarettes, and something else I couldn't place. I rang the bell on the counter. After a minute or two, this old man shuffled out from the back room. His hair was thin, gray, and his face was wrinkled in a way that made it hard to tell if he was just tired or just old. His name tag said, Frank. You looking for a room? He asked. His voice was gravelly, like he hadn't spoken much that day. Yeah, just for the night, I replied, trying to sound casual even though I was feeling a bit uneasy. Frank handed me a key without saying much more. It was an actual metal key, none of those key cards you get nowadays. He pointed down the hall and said, Room 7, checkout's at 11. I took the key, nodded, and made my way down the narrow hallway. The walls were lined with faded, peeling wallpaper, and the floor creaked under every step. It felt like the kind of place that hadn't been updated since the 70s. Room 7 was at the far end of the hall, and as soon as I opened the door, I could smell that same musty, stale air from the lobby. The room was small, just a bed, a dresser with an old TV on it, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been cleaned properly in years. I set my bag down and tried to shake the uneasy feeling that had been creeping up on me since I'd arrived. I told myself it was just because the place was a little rundown. Nothing to worry about, right? After a quick shower, if you could call it that, the water was lukewarm at best, I laid down on the bed and tried to relax. But something felt off. You know when you can just sense that something isn't right? I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, even though I hadn't seen another guest the entire time. At some point, I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. At first, I thought it was someone walking down the hall, but then I realized they were closer. Too close. It sounded like they were right outside my door. I sat up in bed listening, my heart racing. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. For a moment, I thought maybe I was just imagining things, but then I heard it. A soft knock, almost hesitant. I froze. My first instinct was to get up and check who it was, but something told me not to. I don't know why, but I just couldn't. I sat there staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer, just silence. I stood up, walked slowly toward the door, and pressed my ear against it, trying to listen for any sign of movement. But all I could hear was my own breathing, Suddenly, the doorknob jiggled, not violently, but like someone was testing it, trying to see if it was unlocked. At that point, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I backed away from the door, my mind racing with all the worst-case scenarios. I didn't know what to do. Do I yell? Do I call the police? But then I remembered. No signal. I stood there, frozen, waiting. After what felt like an eternity, the jiggling stopped. The footsteps started again, but this time, they were moving away, down the hall. I waited a few minutes before I worked up the courage to look through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. I didn't sleep much after that. I stayed up the rest of the night, jumping at every little noise, convinced that someone was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. As soon as the sun came up, I grabbed my stuff and left. When I got to the office to check out, Frank was there, sitting behind the desk, just like the night before. "Everything all right?" he asked, his expression as blank as ever. "Yeah, fine," I lied. I didn't mention the footsteps, the knocking, the jiggling doorknob. I just wanted to get out of there. I got in my car and drove off, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they were turning white. I didn't stop until I was a good 50 miles down the road, and even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was still following me. I don't know what happened that night at Carter's roadside inn. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me after a long day of driving. But I've never gone back, and I never will. You know, there's this moment when you're driving for so long that you start to feel disconnected from everything. Like the world outside your car is just a blur, and you're floating through it. That's exactly how I felt on the second night of my road trip. I was driving from Chicago to Denver. It was supposed to be this fun solo trip, just me, my playlist, and the open road. I thought it'd be a good way to clear my head, you know? Work had been, well, brutal, and I hadn't taken time off in years, so I decided to just go for it. Hop in the car, head west, see some new places. Simple, right? The first day was smooth. I stopped off in Des Moines for the night, and everything was fine. But on the second night, somewhere in Nebraska, that's when things started to get weird. It was about 10 p.m. and I was getting tired. I'd been on the road since morning and figured it was time to pull over, grab a coffee or something, maybe stretch my legs. The thing is, in that part of Nebraska, there's nothing but open plains for miles. Just fields and the occasional barn, no real towns, no gas stations. My GPS said there was a rest stop coming up though, so I figured I'd stop there. I spotted the sign about 10 minutes later, just a little wooden one off the side of the highway that read, "Rest area 1 mile." So I took the exit. The rest stop was tucked away off the road, hidden by a line of trees. It was old, the kind of place that probably hadn't seen an update in 30 years. There were a couple of vending machines, an empty parking lot, and a small brick building that housed the bathrooms. No lights though, just the dim glow from the car's headlights cutting through the darkness. I parked, got out of the car, and stretched. There wasn't another car in sight. The highway was dead. No trucks, no headlights, nothing. Just me and the crickets. But the quiet wasn't comforting. It felt off, like something was wrong. But I brushed it off, chalking it up to road fatigue. I headed over to the vending machines, hoping to get a coffee or maybe a soda to wake me up. I fished some change out of my pocket and hit the button for a coffee. The machine whirred, clicked, but nothing came out. I tried again, still nothing. I laughed to myself. Figures, right? That's when I heard it. This faint sound, like footsteps on gravel, coming from behind the rest stop building. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. You know how you get after driving for hours on end? Your brain starts to mess with you. But the sound got louder, closer. And it wasn't just footsteps anymore. It was something else, like a dragging noise. I felt my heart rate spike, but I told myself not to be stupid. It was probably just another driver who'd pulled in while I wasn't paying attention. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I glanced around, but I didn't see anyone. Just the empty lot, my car, and the dark road stretching out into the night. That's when the dragging sound stopped. It was dead silent again, but I could feel this pressure, like someone was watching me. My skin started to crawl. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. I was being paranoid, right? There was nobody out here. I was just tired, imagining things. I started walking back to my car, but then I heard it again, closer this time, the footsteps. Only now, They sounded like they were coming from inside the bathroom building. I froze, my hand on the car door handle. What the hell? The rest stop was empty when I got here, and I hadn't heard any other cars pull in. But someone was definitely inside that building. My first thought was maybe a homeless person or some drifter, but it didn't feel right. Something about the way the sound echoed in the stillness of the night. It was too deliberate, too slow. Like whoever was inside wanted me to hear them. Against my better judgment, I took a few steps toward the building. I know it sounds stupid now, but at the time, curiosity got the best of me. I just needed to see. I needed to know if I was alone. The closer I got, the louder the footsteps became, but I still didn't see anyone. The door to the men's bathroom was slightly ajar, and that's when I smelled it. This awful, sour stench like something had died in there. My stomach turned. Every instinct told me to get back in the car and leave, but I couldn't. I had to look. I don't know why, but I had to. I stepped up to the door, pushed it open a little more. The smell hit me like a wall, and I gagged, covering my mouth. The light inside flickered, casting these long, dark shadows across the dirty tile floor. And then I saw it, smeared on the wall in what looked like dried blood, was a handprint. I stumbled back, my heart racing. What the hell was this place? That's when I heard it again, the dragging sound. But this time, it wasn't coming from inside the building. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Standing there just a few feet away was a man. He was tall, gaunt, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His face was pale, his eyes dark and hollow, and in his hand he was dragging a heavy, rusted chain along the ground. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there staring at me. I backed up slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I reached for my car door, my hand shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. As soon as I got the door open, I jumped inside and slammed it shut, locking it as fast as I could. The man just stood there, watching, his expression blank. I threw the car into reverse and floored it, backing out of the rest stop and speeding down the highway. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know if he was still there. I drove for another hour before I found a motel off the main highway. I pulled into the lot, parked, and just sat there for a minute, trying to catch my breath. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't shake the image of that man, or the sound of that chain dragging along the ground. The next morning, I tried to put it out of my mind. Maybe it was just some crazy drifter, right? Maybe I was tired, imagining things. But here's the thing. I checked my GPS later. There's no rest stop at that location. In fact, there's no rest stop for another 50 miles from where I was that night. I don't know what I saw or who that man was, but I haven't taken a road trip since, and I'm not sure I ever will again.